umbrella, which has a wide array of commercial uses, as well as business service, school use, and childcare. The Brackendale Farmers Institute Park is also being rezoned from residential zoning to District Park Zone, P3. Agriculture is added as a use to the park to allow for potential expansion of agricultural uses in the park in the future. And at this time, staff have been working with the applicants on a draft land development agreement. The draft land development agreement deals mostly with non-hazard conditions, as those are going to be contained in a separate. And just to give council some overview, the agreement itself isn't yet available for council review. It'll come back at adoption. But in overview, the agreement establishes a max residential unit count, and that is 1,215 units total. So there may be, legislative changes as this development has been in the pipeline for a very long time that occur, such as the new legislation that requires, a different variety of density to be allowed on each single detached lot. I think we can deal with that in the future based on the fact that the land development agreement will, in the end, secure a total number of units that are permitted. So whether it's a single family or a duplex, that is something that we can resolve in the future and doesn't put at risk the overall density cap that the site has. As part of the housing mix, there are 85 affordable units proposed. The land development agreement secures those at the 200 unit mark. So by the time there are 200 market units completed on the site, there will also have to be 85 affordable rental units completed. And the same for market rental units. So there are 85 market rental units to be completed by 300 unit mark. There is security for 1,200 square meter commercial space. That space has to be completed by 600 market units. Within that space, there's a requirement to allocate 162 childcare spaces. So there's got to be a childcare facility that will accommodate 162 childcare spaces, which is based on the district's calculation for childcare needs generated by a particular development. There are some mitigation related, and when I say mitigation, that's hazard mitigation related subdivision controls. There are some local area service tax stipulations, making sure that local service area is established prior to development. There's no gas commitment for residential portions of this development. There is a commitment to facilitate the transfer of the Brackendale Farmers Institute Park. Because the park is owned by the province, there's limited control that the applicants have over that process. However, there are commitments such as a letter from Squamish Nation that supports the district's acquisition of that park. There's also a 1.5 million cash contribution to our Community Amenity Contribution Fund, and that is supposed to come in at adoption. There are commitments for Strata Park activation and Greenway corridor construction. So the development includes an extensive amount of Greenway corridors, and you can see those as green lines on the map. Those are going to be Strata-owned greenways with public access. There's a commitment to secure Ray Peters Trail as a dedication to the district, and then complete upgrades and extension of the trail. There's active transportation infrastructure commitment along Ross Road, and Ross Road will have to be rebuilt to district standards in the future. And finally, there is a commitment for a central transit node, a car share, and electric charging stations in the neighborhood commercial center. And that is it for the land development agreement overview.
Thank you. Now I'd like to provide a history of relevant activities and events in relation to the proposed Cheekeye River development and debris flow mitigation. In 2011, the Squamish Nation and District entered into an intergovernmental cooperation accord that acknowledged Squamish Nation could apply to the province for an interest in Cheekeye Fan Crown lands and to the district for development approval for a single-family residential housing and commercial development. Subsequently, in 2013, a Squamish Nation Development Partnership, now called Squamish Sea to Sky Developments, or SSSD, submitted a rezoning and OCP amendment application for the Cheekeye River development, which is located on the Cheekeye alluvial fan and is exposed to significant hazards and risk to loss of life from large debris flows. So based on the significant hazard, two expert panels were convened in 2014 and 2015. The first expert panel provided an opinion on what magnitude hazard event should be considered, and the second panel provided an opinion on risk tolerance criteria, and I'll speak more about this on the next slide. Based on the expert panel's guidance, in 2015, SSSD's engineering consultant, BGC Engineering, prepared a hazard assessment and debris flow mapping for the Cheekeye Fen. Based on that work, the district adopted an interim development policy to limit new developments on the Cheekeye Fen in order to manage risk in the absence of structural mitigation. And this policy was subsequently incorporated into the official community plan. In 2016, the development received first reading of the rezoning application and second reading of the OCP amendment. And the district also completed an assessment of mitigation alternatives that evaluated mitigation options for the Cheekeye Fen, and I'll also speak to that on a later slide. In 2017, there was a first public hearing for the rezoning and OCP amendment applications. And in 2018, district staff provided two presentations to council with regards to funding the operations and maintenance costs of the barrier, which would be a district responsibility. And those presentations evaluated a funding plan for operating and maintenance costs and building a reserve for debris removal following large debris flows. There was also an update on discussions with the province in relation to disaster financial assistance to potentially cover the cost of debris removal. Also in 2018, there was a second public hearing, and the Cheekeye River development was granted third reading, which included an extensive list of conditions, many of which were related to debris flow hazard and mitigation that needed to be met prior to rezoning adoption. Between 2018 and 2022, BGC developed the detailed design of the Cheekeye debris flow barrier and associated studies, and the district, province, and Squamish Nation engaged an independent expert review panel who provided letters of opinion on the design. I'll speak to that as a little in further detail later. Since 2022, there has been work on securing provincial and federal permits, as well as land tenure for the Cheekeye barrier. And there's also been significant work to develop an operations and maintenance financial model that Ms. Souza will speak to in a later slide. As I mentioned on the last slide, early on in this project, two separate expert review panels were convened. Expert panel number one was tasked with determining what hazard event should be considered for mitigation and subsequent risk assessments. They concluded that the largest event that should be considered is a 5.5 million cubic meter debris flow that coincided with a 1 in 10,000 year return period event. The second expert panel was tasked with providing guidance on loss of life risk tolerance criteria, and they recommended that risk to loss of life for individuals should be less than 1 in 10,000 per year within existing developments and less than 1 in 100,000 per year for new developments. For societal or group risk, which is considered when there are large groups of people within a hazard zone, such as the Cheekeye Fen, the panel recommended that risk should fall within the broadly acceptable or as low as reasonably practicable, or ALARP, areas of the diagram shown here. This is a frequency to number of fatalities diagram, and this is identical to a risk diagram that is used in other jurisdictions, including Hong Kong, Canmore, and North Vancouver. Both panels concluded that all forms of mitigation should be considered and carefully evaluated, including mitigation structures like the barrier and non-structural measures such as land use zoning. As I'm, oh, sorry, wrong slide here. There we go. So with confirmation of what hazard event to use and risk tolerance criteria from the expert panels, BGC completed hazard modeling and a baseline risk assessment for existing and proposed development. The risk assessment concluded that group risk fell within the unacceptable zone, and there were 4 parcels near the Cheekeye and Cheekamish confluence that exceeded individual risk thresholds. The proposed development increased the group risk as shown on the top diagram. The risk with existing development is shown in blue, and existing and proposed is shown in green. And so this is with no mitigation in place. You can see that the proposed development would increase the risk. The proposed development site also had intolerable risk for individuals within the northern parcels and parcels closest to Highway 99. For council's context, it's worth noting that the Cheekeye Fan is one of several areas within the community that have unacceptable risk. The district completed a risk assessment for the Squamish River and coastal floodplains in 2019 that showed that they also had unacceptable risk to loss of life, even if dikes were upgraded well above provincial standards, which would come at a very significant cost. Given this, the district's approach is to reduce risk to as low as reasonably practical through ongoing dike upgrades, by restricting densification in high-risk areas, and regulating all new development to meet the requirements of the floodplain bylaw. And this example highlights that accepting risk is necessary in some cases where there are existing communities within hazard areas, and that mitigation to acceptable levels is not always possible and must take into account considerations such as available funding. Following the risk assessment and prior to BGC entering the detailed design phase of the barrier, the district retained Kerwood Lydell to complete an assessment of mitigation alternatives to independently evaluate mitigation options and determine the best approach moving forward. The evaluation considered a range of mitigation options, including barriers, basins, berms, and channelization in various locations on the fan, as well as wide-scale retreat of existing development from the fan. The report recommended that an approach for the district to work with SSSD to advance the design of a large barrier at the apex of the Cheekeye Fan in order to confirm that the barrier was feasible from a financial and permitting perspective, and to allow for proper evaluation of anticipated operations and maintenance responsibilities and costs. The advantages noted in the report of this approach were that capital costs would be funded through development, and the development could create a mechanism to fund ongoing operations and maintenance costs. And finally, that a barrier at the apex of the fan protects the greatest area in comparison with the alternatives. The report provided 33 recommendations that were recommended to be taken into account in further considering the barrier, and many of those were subsequently incorporated into rezoning conditions at third reading. Since third reading in 2018, SSSD have been working with their engineering consultants, BGC, on the detailed design of the barrier. The barrier would be among the largest in the world, and it's designed to be located southeast of Cat Lake in the Cheekeye River corridor. It would be a 24-meter tall open check dam composed of roller compacted concrete, and the design includes a tapered opening in the middle of the barrier that narrows to 6 meters wide at the narrowest point. The slot also includes 8 steel beams designed to capture debris during large debris flow events that can be adjusted in the future if necessary. The barrier would be over 200 meters long from end to end, 7 meters wide at the crest to allow for maintenance vehicles, and over 40 meters wide at the base with a total storage capacity of 2.4 million cubic meters. And there would also be a bridge designed to span across the opening to allow for access across the barrier. The capital cost to build the structure is estimated at over $100 million. Based on provincial guidelines, all new dikes approved under the Dike Maintenance Act must be owned by local governments. The barrier would be considered a dike, and the district is therefore responsible for ownership and operations and maintenance costs and responsibilities. which includes annual and post-event inspections, vegetation management of berms that are associated with the barrier, as well as access road maintenance, repair and replacement of the barrier components, sediment management within the basin, post-event restoration, which would include repairs and sediment removal following large events. It's estimated at this stage that a sediment cleanout following a major event would take between 5 and 10 years and would come at a significant cost. In 2018, after third reading of the rezoning and OCP amendment bylaws, at the initiation of the detailed design phase of the barrier, the district, Squamish Nation, and province engaged an independent expert review panel, or IERP, to review and provide advice in relation to the detailed design, given the highly technical nature. The IERP reviewed and provided 4 letters of opinion on the detailed design and associated studies. Their scope was not to certify or approve the design of the barrier, but rather to provide assurance to the district, province, and Squamish Nation that the design was reasonable and met applicable professional practice standards. BGC are ultimately responsible for the design of the barrier as the engineers of record. Overall, in the IERP's opinion, the detailed design and supporting documents were considered reasonable and met the applicable professional practice guidelines. In 2018, at the third reading of rezoning, the district established a number of conditions that needed to be met prior to adoption. Many of these are related to hazard, as shown on this slide. Generally, most conditions are considered to be met, including preparing debris flow modeling, committing to make those maps public at rezoning adoption, allowing the district or other landowners to utilize the debris flow model at cost, updating the baseline risk assessment, preparing the detailed design as well as the operations and maintenance manual and associated cost estimates, completing a final risk assessment confirming that risk tolerance criteria can be met and that the proposed development is safe for the intended use. There are 3 conditions that remain outstanding and require further work. The first is securing all permits. Nearly all permits have been received with the exception of the Fisheries Act authorization, which has not yet been issued, but is expected to be issued soon, potentially in April. The second is securing land tenure. A license of occupation has been provided by the province for district signature and is currently under review by the district. Staff recommend that this condition will be considered complete once council agrees to accept the role as local diking authority for the barrier, which would be at rezoning adoption, and also completing a servicing agreement allowing SSSD to construct the barrier in the district's name. And finally, the last outstanding condition is with respect to operations and maintenance funding model, which is under review by staff to ensure that it meets district needs. And on that topic, I will hand it over to Ms. Souza, who can speak in further detail on financial implications.
So a condition of rezoning is that SSSD prepare an operations and maintenance funding model. SSSD has submitted the model to the district, and to note, the model is for a 100-year timeframe. The operations and maintenance funding model costs can be grouped into 3 categories: regular operations and maintenance, asset management, and post-event restoration costs. The financial model is in 2022 dollars, and therefore all costs presented during this presentation are also in 2022 dollars. Operations and maintenance consist of items such as staffing, inspections, vegetation management, maintaining equipment and access roads, and sediment management for small events. It is estimated that the annual operation and maintenance costs will be between $446,000 and $637,000. I'd like to note that the operations and maintenance funding model submitted by SSSD estimated operations and maintenance costs to be $111,000 to $260,000 per year. The district has added its staffing costs and smaller event sediment management. At the June 2018 council meeting, council supported moving forward with the concept of some form of shared Local area service taxation and general taxation model. On average, local area service tax for operations and maintenance costs can range from $0 to $560 per unit per year. And general taxation can range from $0 to $637,000 per year, which is equivalent to a 0 to 1.7% tax increase. The ranges depend on the shared split between the local area service and general taxation. Capital repairs and replacements over a 100-year period in the operations and maintenance funding models submitted by SSSD are estimated to cost a total of $21,700,000. On average, the local area service tax for asset management ranges from $0 to $191 per year per unit. The general taxation range is $0 to $217,000 per year, which is equivalent to a 0 to 0.6% tax increase. The ranges depend on the shared split between local area service and general taxation. The amounts collected for capital repairs would be added to a reserve. In 2018, staff presented to council that the district could potentially manage the financial risk of post-event restoration through insurance. Since 2018, further work and investigation has been completed regarding the viability of insurance. Assurance is assessed year to year and therefore not guaranteed over the long term. In addition, due to the highly specialized insurance product that would be required, the pool of insurers is small, which increases the risk of insurance not being available over the long term. Staff, with the advice of the Municipal Insurance Association of BC, do not recommend insurance as a viable option for further consideration to manage financial risk of post-event restoration. Therefore, the model utilized in 2018 can no longer be considered a viable option. Rather, alternative funding mechanisms to cover potential future post-event restoration costs are being investigated, and as a condition of rezoning will be presented to council as the work is completed. The next steps are to finalize the capacity agreement with SSSD to assist with district staffing costs related to this file, and to continue to work with SSSD to address rezoning conditions. This brings us to the end of the presentation, so I'll now turn it back over to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the overview. Just so folks are aware, this is an update from staff on this file. As staff mentioned, it's been in the pipeline for a long time, and even the second rezoning was done before any of the current council was around the table. And so this is an opportunity to bring us up to speed on when the file is at, given that we are nearing completion of the requirements or conditions that were set out at rezoning. There's no decision to be made by council today, but this is an opportunity to ask questions and clarify anything that may be on your mind. So with that, I will turn it over to council for questions, and I'll start with Mayor Herford.
Thank you for the presentation. Quite a long history on this file. I'm going to start with the funding piece for I suppose operations and for clean out asset management. That whole sort of three-part equation, and the local service area and general taxation being the two sources that we're discussing. Do the folks inside the local service area, they would also pay property tax? So those two impacts would be sort of layered on for those folks that would fall inside the area. Is that correct? I just haven't dealt with one of these before.
Through the chair, yes, you're correct.
Okay, and the barrier protects. I get this development is the driver of the construction of it, but will protect other properties. And has that been worked into into potential funding models as to how the other properties would contribute or could contribute should their land use change over time because of the construction of the barrier?
Through the chair, just for a point of clarification, are you speaking to general taxation and the local area service tax?
Yeah, I guess I guess that would be just when we're thinking about, when staff is thinking about those things, if additional uses are proposed and now facilitated by construction of the barrier in other properties outside of this development, is there a mechanism or what mechanism would be used for them to be able to contribute? Is that sort of an expansion of the service being included in the service area as part of a potential rezoning, or to contribute that? Like, what mechanisms exist, and have staff turned their mind to that yet as they're contemplating how this can all come together?
Pass that to Mr. Valeniscus. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair, there are mechanisms that can be applied to rezoning applications, and presumably any future development outside of this development site will require rezoning. So we do have tools like a community amenity contribution policy. We also have policy in our official community plan that directs us to prepare a sub-area plan once mitigation is in place to guide the future development on the Cheekeye fan. And a funding mechanism such as that could be incorporated in that sub-area plan for upzoning future properties.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hamilton next. Go ahead.
Thanks very much, and thanks for the update on this large project, large in many ways. When we think about these large projects, the lifespan of these projects, from the asset management perspective, the staff report reflects a 100-year asset management lifespan. But then when considering the operation and maintenance section, it considers the 10 to 30 year, or the 30 to 100 year, the 30-year return period for operation and maintenance, and that's mostly in debris flow removal. What's the reasoning between picking two different lifespans for two different aspects of the project?
Through the chair, from an operations and maintenance perspective, the model submitted by SSSD, as you noted, is the 100 years. So the amounts without the volume class 1 is over the 100-year period. And then what we did was considered a volume class 1 smaller events that could be undertaken in terms of annual operations and maintenance. And the probability of that event in the 1 in 30 years was brought into the annual operations and maintenance costs over the 100-year lifespan.
Okay, thanks. I think there's some thinking about probabilities happening that are difficult to deconvolute. Okay, my second question is on local area service taxation. Do we currently have any local area service taxation agreements within Squamish, or would this be the first one?
Through the chair, would be the first one.
And following on from that, is there a conceptual or is there some consideration of a difference between a debris flow barrier and a dike that we should consider when considering whether to use general taxation or local area service taxation?
Through the chair, a local area service tax bylaw can be utilized by the district at any time. The condition of it is it needs to benefit the local service. So the taxpayer has to benefit from the local service. It is very nuanced, and we will be bringing that back to council at a future date. Hopefully that answers your question. If you'd like more information, I can definitely provide it.
Go ahead, Mr. Ralston.
I just wanted to add, I think one thing that's different in this case is that there's a willing landowner who's willing to consent to a local area service, whereas imposing a local service within one of our existing floodplains would require consent from a majority of landowners. And so that makes it a lot more challenging to retroactively impose a local area service. So this is sort of an opportunity because there's a new large development that are willing to enter into a local area service tax.
Right. Yeah, I see that. Okay. And my final question was on the idea of post-event recovery expenses. Do we have any other reserves? Like, do we have a reserve set aside for flood, fire, earthquake? These are all hazards that we'll face. Or do we not? Like, what reserves do we have?
Pass it over to Ms. Boxford.
Thank you for the question through the chair. So the district does not have specific reserves for emergency situations. However, council will note in 2021 that a general operating reserve was established, and it removed any funds that were sitting in the unappropriated cumulative surplus and designed to be able to be utilized for should there be an emergency in the future. Now that reserve is currently sitting around 9 million at this point.
And for those listening online, Ms. Boxford is our General Manager of Financial Services. Thanks for stepping in. Do you have any further questions?
No, that's it for now. Thanks.
Councillor Pettingill, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. In some of the background documents, it speaks to a chance that instead of cleaning out the barrier, you might need to replace it. And then we're into capital costs for replacement, not just maintenance. Do we have an understanding of what the likelihood of that is? Like, I understand there's some understanding of likelihood of different event sizes or return frequency, I guess. But in terms of the probability of having to replace the structure itself, do we understand where that falls into?
Through the chair, that is a potential outcome. I think that it would depend on the cost of building an alternate structure in relation to the cost of cleaning out sediment and debris behind the barrier. And I think depending on at what point in time that occurred, that there would need to be an analysis at that point to confirm what is the most cost-effective and feasible way to restore mitigation for the fan.
Not seeing any other hands, I'll put myself on the list and I'll come to you, Councillor Greenlaw. Mr. Rolston, you mentioned that the hazard risk profile in this area is not unique to Squamish. We live in a high risk area, unfortunately, with lots of natural hazards. Can you speak to where this might sit on our priority risk mitigation list that came out of the Integrated Flood Hazard Management? So relative to the other risks where we're putting in thoughts around capital asset management for hazard mitigation, where does this fall on our priority list relative to the rest of the district?
Through the chair, so I'll provide a little bit of chronology. First, the district completed an integrated flood hazard management plan. So that preceded the risk assessment. So it was completed and priorities were determined prior to having the quantitative risk assessment, which was completed the following year. And then over the past several years, we've received updated information on risk in relation to the Cheekeye fan. So all of these risks have not been all brought together and considered. The Cheekeye fan was intentionally excluded from the integrated flood hazard management plan, knowing that there was this parallel process that was taking place. And so all of these hazards have not been brought together in a single place to determine how the relative priority stacks up.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And then, Ms. Souza, you mentioned in your presentation, and it says in the staff report that the operation and maintenance funding model, which was required as a condition of rezoning, had an annual cost of $447 to $637 based on our estimates, but the model that was submitted by SSSD was $111,000 to $260,000. Can you just explain what that level of discrepancy is between what was submitted versus our estimates?
Through the chair, the district did an analysis in terms of what our staffing costs would be for maintaining the barrier. So the district staffing costs have been added, and then also based on the SSSD model of the volume classes, what the annualized volume class 1 would be. So it's those three pieces, is the pieces that was submitted by SSSD, district staffing on top of that, and then small event management are the three pieces.
Sorry, can you re-explain the inclusion of the class 1 event?
Through the chair is actually, you know what, to discuss probabilities, it might be better for my colleague David Ralston are you okay discussing volume class 1?
Through the chair, volume class 1 are small events between 0 to 30-year return period. So these are more regular, the type of debris flow events that we would occur on a regular basis and as part of more the normal operating costs. So they were sort of delineated from the larger debris flow events that are more infrequent and would come at a higher cost. So volume class 1, the small ones were kind of lumped in with the asset management costs, just kind of more as a day-to-day type of expense.
Okay, and just out of curiosity, do we have any idea what a volume class 1 event impact would have on the community if a barrier didn't exist? So if a class 1 event were to occur tomorrow, what would the impact be?
Through the chair, so there would be, we have hazard mapping for all of the volume class events that are available. Generally for an event of that magnitude, we would probably expect impacts closer to the river corridor. So there could be erosion and sedimentation. Most of the impacts would be seen near the confluence of the Cheekeye and Cheekamish rivers, and there are some developed properties down there. So there could potentially be some property damage. Generally, it's more minor in nature for those smaller events.
And municipal infrastructure wise, there's a bridge and a road, but that's about it.
I think the amount of municipal infrastructure impacted by a volume class 1 event would be pretty minimal.
That's helpful. Thank you. And then my last question was just, when does the split between the local service area tax and general taxation need to be determined? Is that a condition before rezoning, or does that happen after the fact?
Through the chair, so a condition in the land development agreement will be the petition for the local service or local area service tax, but the actual taxation model doesn't need to be determined at that point. However, once we have all information, we will be bringing that back to council for consideration.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Greenlaw. Go ahead.
Thanks. Just building on some of the questions from Councillor Stoner, I was just wondering, are we going to need to find specialized staff to complete the operations and maintenance for this?
Through the chair, items like access road maintenance and vegetation management would likely be completed by district public works crews. Any sort of specialized work would likely be through contractors. So we'd be retaining contractors for, as well as consultants for things like annual or post-event inspections, any type of specialized work or anything requiring specialized equipment that the district may not have. So yeah, anything more complex in nature would be likely contracted out.
Okay, thanks. And then I was just wondering, in terms of the operation and maintenance cost estimates, over time, do they take into account any inflation?
Through the chair, it's all in 2022 dollars right now.
Okay, thanks.
I saw Councillor Pettingill's hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand the service area stuff properly. So I understand that the starting point or proposal right now is a service area for this development and then general taxation to fund the operations and management. But this barrier would protect a whole bunch of property beyond this development, and some of it would become developable, and the OCP may change over time and so on. Does it require a new petition for if someone says, or like, do we have a mechanism by which, hey, as part of your rezoning, you have to petition or agree to join the service area? Do we have to petition everyone, or someone can just sort of sign on as part of their rezoning?
Through the chair, it's everyone. So any changes to the local area service bylaw or area, you have to go back to petition or send vote.
Okay, and then similarly, so setting aside the service area, but in terms of a latecomer fee of sorts, like, you know, you, as part of your rezoning in this area, we would like to see a contribution to the operations and management reserve. Is that something that we have the ability to do, or especially with all the changes in CACs and so on, or could this be captured in ACC, or we just haven't gone down that road to understand?
Through the chair, currently the legislative environment is such that CACs are still possible. So this time the answer would be yes. If someone is going through the rezoning process, you know, a portion of their community amendment contributions could be directed to the operations and maintenance of the debris flow barrier. But that's just the current situation. Things could change in the future, but at this point it's possible.
Councillor Hamilton, go ahead.
Thanks very much. I looked for it. I couldn't find. I'm sure it exists. I just wasn't able to find it. The sort of a debris flow, a hazard mapping of what sort of level of volume flow would be impacting a certain area. And when I think about the infrastructure and the major impacts as we go, the bridge, Highway 99 across the Cheekeye River, that I think is the first piece of infrastructure that would be impacted. And then we've got the Cheekeye-Cheakamus confluence, where there's a municipal bridge and there's some properties. And I think the next one going out from that major piece of infrastructure would be the middle school and the elementary school. Could you give me an idea of what sort of volume class events would impact Highway 99? What sort of volume class events would impact the Cheekeye-Cheakamus confluence at a level that would potentially damage the bridge? And what sort of volume level event would be required to impact Don Ross Middle School and Brackendale Elementary?
Through the chair, all of that hazard mapping has been provided. It hasn't been included in any of the reports because it is proprietary at this point in time. One of the rezoning conditions is to make all of that mapping public at the time of rezoning adoption. So the district has seen those maps. We have hard copies of them. In terms of answering your questions and putting a defined return period, I'm hesitant to do that right here and now because I don't want to give you incorrect information, but we can certainly follow up with that information.
Council, any further questions at this time? Staff, your presentation included a slide on next steps. And as I mentioned at the outset, this is really just kind of a primer to get us and the community back up to speed. It looked like we were getting close to the list of conditions being completed. Do we have an anticipation on a timeline for next steps? And what, or yeah, there was some component there, but what does that look like going forward?
Thank you, through the chair. It's a little bit like a marathon. The last mile can be the hardest sometimes. So staff are working with the developers group on the final conditions. And then once those have been satisfied, we will come forward with readings for the rezoning bylaws beyond a committee of the whole. So we'll keep council and the community updated on timing as soon as we have a better idea what that looks like.
All right. Councillor French. I had one additional question. Mary, did you have a question or are you going to move recommend? My last question, and now I'm going to forget it because I didn't write it down. So never mind. Moved by the staff recommendation, moved by Councillor French, seconded by Mayor Herford. Comments? Go ahead. You can start, Councillor French.
Thanks, Chair. And our CAO said what I was going to open with. This project, like no other in the district work files, is truly a marathon and definitely is not a sprint. And it's a complicated marathon. It's being run on road, it's being run on trails, over bridges and all kinds of difficult terrain. And so all of that to say to staff, thank you for the great work. Not just to prepare for this meeting, but all the way back to 2011 and when this conversation began. This update has been very helpful, and thankful for the information.
Mayor Herford.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity to have an update in it, and the amount of background documentation provided was truly staggering. So I know that all the folks, just so much work has gone into getting us to where we are. I'm looking forward to the next steps here, and it is quite something to be living with one of the was it the most studied alluvial fans in the country, if not in North America or beyond. So I'm excited about the prospect of grappling with these next steps to provide a level of protection to the community. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. I guess my comments are around how important those next steps will be when we can finally get to them. I spoke at the 2018 public hearing. So did my mother. She spoke against me on the issue of general taxation. I felt at the time, and I do still today, that the general taxation must be considered because of what is at stake for the community at large in the Cheekeye Fan and its future land use. The lands, in fact, have been pre-zoned for the forest industry, a portion of them, over 20 years ago. And so we have long-standing plans for how we're going to be able to use or wish to use or need to use the Cheekeye Fan for a long time now. I note in the report to council under Prepared for the Future, there isn't really an emphasis here yet on the economic development importance, or one of our goals under Prepared for the Future is securing and improving our inventory of employment lands, and not least medium industrial in that category. So it's not there now. I just note that, but we need to be speaking and addressing about that topic in future. Another aspect of the report to council under OCP policies, we do have 2 OCP policies concerning industrial uses in the Cheekeye Fan, and they shouldn't be overlooked. We do have a commitment for a forest industry land strategy, and we also have another policy concerning uses that don't require the terrain hazard mitigation and what that means. How do we activate those lands? Right now, it's onerous for land users to use that route because of all of the costs of the professional sign-offs and the engineering and so forth. Finally, on the report to council, under cross-departmental collaboration, I don't see a reference to economic development. And I think we must understand, all of us and the public, how important the Cheekeye Fan is for the long-term economic development of Squamish. So finally, I think we need to be ready for making plans, and for those uses and for the investors and for our next industrial park or business park, as that's where it's going to be. And it takes years to plan an industrial park. We have a waiting list of companies. I can think of 12 companies offhand, already significant players to our community or who want solutions. So I guess I'm just expressing that to hope that we can sooner rather than later start discussing the economic development potential of the Cheekeye Fan and satisfying already existing needs. Thank you.
Councillor Hamilton, do you have any comments?
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, this is indeed a big project with big numbers, and we're considering very, very long timescales. We're looking at numbers here, and when we look at a 1 in 10,000 year event, yeah, it's hard for the human mind to consider what 10 10,000 years really looks like. And I'd like to encourage everybody to think about the probabilities of events occurring in relation to the other hazards that we face in living in this community. The BC Auditor General has put a roughly 10% chance of a major earthquake, like a class 9 earthquake in the next 50 years. We don't spend a lot of time. We do think about it now and again. We don't spend a ton of time thinking about it. But that's within some of the categories of events that we are considering are well beyond that category. Yeah. So when we're thinking about these large impact events, I want us to think also about the small probability of them occurring. Anyways, thank you very much for the work on this. This is a very difficult piece of work, and I do sincerely look forward to seeing it come to construction. Thanks.
Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, thanks. It is definitely a challenge to wrap your head around the probability versus the costs and sort of largest in the world structure and wrap your head around and all of that. I mean, intuitively, and maybe this is where I need some more understanding of probabilities. If we got that 10% chance of the magnitude 9 earthquake, that's probably going to cause the level 6, I think, debris flow here. And so, if that's, so maybe we are in fact aligned there. But I will say, I've been following this since before I was on council, and I know it's been a challenging process, and we're trying to, I think, work our way through it, and I'm glad for that. There does seem to be a lot of opportunity if we can open up that area and protect it, and we know some people are at risk now, and so providing that critical protection is important. Yeah, it's just challenging to wrap your head around, so I'm glad we have so many experts in the room. There are a few things in the land development agreement that jumped out at me. It seems sort of not the thing to focus on at this point. The sort of bigger picture seems a little more challenging, but assuming that we can get there on the debris flow barrier, and it seems like we are making progress, I think would like to see us really focus on sustainability and no gas across the whole thing, and maybe some more density, and it's probably opportunity for all in there. And I know, we don't want to sidetrack ourselves, but I think I just wanted to get those points in, and hopefully, we'll keep moving forward.
Thank you. I'll make some comments and I'll come to you, Councillor Greenlaw. Yeah, thanks for bringing us up to speed, both council and the community, on this long file. I think it is interesting to see some of the components that are in the land development agreement, thinking back to when this actually came to fruition, that there's actually affordable housing that's provisioned for. And then also keeping in mind that the original application came in 2013 under a very different set of policies and guidelines than what we currently have today. We have a brand new OCP since then. So I think keeping that context in mind is important, and where we actually have continued efforts to open up negotiations with the developer or not, given how much work has been done since third reading was given. I think at times I thought it was a bit of a long shot and maybe wasn't really going to happen. But here we are. There's an immense amount of work that has happened. And I think in many ways it's been leading in the way that it has been approached, in conjunction with Squamish Nation and the developer and the district and the province at the table. It's amazing to see the number of minds that have come together to try and address this really complex challenge. I don't have any specific comments at this time. I think one of the things that comes out in the report that has changed since 2018 is the availability of insurance and what that means for us as a district in terms of operation, maintenance, and where our level of risk tolerance is with respect to when those events occur and how much money we need to be putting aside. And so appreciate the ongoing work that's continuing to try and figure out an appropriate funding model to get us there. I think the reality is that we knew that as we were going to start to mitigate against natural hazards, that there is a cost in doing so. We've also come a really long way in the way that we manage our assets and we plan for them. I don't think we've had this level of due diligence on a lot of our assets up until about 5 or 6 years ago. And so we're also bringing in a brand new, very expensive piece of infrastructure under a whole different financial regime, which I think is financially prudent, but also keeping in check the value that having that protection can have for our community more generally, I think is the important balance that'll be made here as we continue to try and assess those conditions before adoption. So thanks for the update. And Councillor Greenlaw, do you have any comments?
Yeah, well, thank you for the update. It's a very deeply technical and complicated project that spans several councils now, and I don't know how many staff members, but I'm sure quite a few. And it's such an important project for ensuring the safety of many members in our community and future assets as well, and ensuring their safety. I do get a bit nervous when I hear terms like largest in North America / world. I don't particularly like being the first in some circumstances. But I'm confident that this thoroughly investigated hazard is being held with the kind of, as a geologist, reverence and respect that it deserves. So thank you very much for all your work.
Thank you. And with that, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much for the update. We'll see you soon. Council will take a 5-minute break just to let staff turn over and bring up their presentation. We'll come back at 3:20. I'm going to get us back on track, team. All right, welcome back, everybody. We are in the Committee of the Whole for March 19th for the District of Squamish on item 4.2 on our agenda, which is the quarterly variance report year end 2023. Our staff will all be happy that we're back on time, and hopefully you'll get out of here at 4 o'clock. We have a full room with lots of budget managers here to be able to respond to any questions, but I will pass it over to Mr. Russell, to Ms. Boxrood to open us up. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Council. My name is Heather Boxrood, General Manager of Financial Information Technology and Procurement Services. I have a mouthful. My pronouns are she, her, so I can be addressed accordingly. I am joined today by Roland Russell, Senior Financial Analyst. As well, we have several budget managers, as you can see, both here in chambers and online, who are here to support Council with any questions you may have on their budgets. Next slide, please. Bye. So I'm happy to inform Council of an improvement to our year-end quarterly report and carry forward amendment process. In prior years, the Q4 financial report and carry forward financial plan amendment were brought to Council on separate Council dates. However, this year, in an effort to provide Council with a more fulsome view of the results and how it relates to the financial plan carry forward amendment, as well as in an effort to reduce the need for duplicate discussions, the Q4 financial report and projects results is being presented today in the Committee of the Whole, and then the carry forward amendment will be in the regular meeting this evening. Note, our external audited financial statements and discussion will occur in May after the completion of the 2023 financial or fiscal audit process. The objective of the Committee of the Whole discussion today is that the District of Squamish receive the year-end 2023 quarterly financial report as presented to the Committee of the Whole for information. Next slide. Thank you. So I'll provide a very high-level snapshot of a few highlights of the year. Then we'll pass it on to Mr. Russell and the budget managers to discuss their projects in detail. Overall, the 2023 fiscal continued to face significant economic challenges with high inflationary cost pressures, contractor availability challenges, and supply chain disruptions, which were felt across the operations and capital budgets. In 2023, the district received $1.7 million in capacity funding from the WLNG and Fortis to manage the district's regulatory requirements associated with the WLNG and Fortis Eagle Mountain gas pipeline project. A long-term capacity agreement has been reached for the duration of the project. The Queensway lift station required emergency work in early 2023 to replace a collapsed manhole. The impact on the 2023 fiscal was approximately $600,000 in capital and $400,000 in operations. A capital amendment was made in the 2023 spring amendment to increase the capital budget to fund the impact. An operations amendment was not required as the additional revenues to the wastewater fund surpassed additional expenditures. The district ratified a 3-year agreement with the Canadian Union of Public Employees, so CUPE, which included 11.5% increase to union salaries across the 2022, 2023, and 2024 fiscals, and a 4.5% inflationary support lump sum payment for a total of approximately $2.5 million. The agreement ratification is heavily influenced by pattern bargaining, which created significant pressure on negotiations as the Lower Mainland agreement settled higher than anticipated. To assist BC communities with infrastructure funding constraints and rapid growth, the province provided communities across BC with a one-time Growing Communities grant. The district received $6.3 million, which was utilized to assist with the Public Works and Facility and Brennan Park renovation funding. As well, the district was awarded several other grants in 2023, including but not limited to investing in Canada's infrastructure program for the wastewater treatment plant, the Jimmy Judd Slough, and then a disaster mitigation and adaptation fund and CMHC Housing Accelerator Fund grants. Finally, high interest rates led to approximately 4.9 million earned in cash held and reserves in working capital. So utilizing single year project spend as a percent of budget is the most consistent metric that the district has available to measure for completion rate year over year as a key performance indicator. In terms of project spend and completion rate, on the report you have in front of you in the variance report, special operating single year projects is approximately 52% of budget, which is similar to the 3-year average of 55%. To note, while reviewing the carry forward report, it was identified that the real estate and facilities master plan pre-development project was classified as a single year project, but the intention is that that project would span over multiple years. So that would indicate that the completion rate for special operating projects is actually more at the 63% level. Single year capital projects completed at approximately 65% of budget, which is an improvement over the 3-year average of 55%. And so with that, I will hand it over to Mr. Russell to walk you through more details.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of Council. We have a relatively short agenda. We're going to discuss the fourth quarter financial results. We'll talk about special and capital operating projects, and then we'll open the floor to discussion. So with respect to revenues, we're going to highlight some things that, in fairness, have already been highlighted by Ms. Boxford. Of the items that we noted, some of the things that perhaps we didn't speak to were an increase in community amenity contributions. I shouldn't say an increase, or probably more accurate statement would be receipt of community amenity contributions to the tune of $1.4 million. We had received a grant from the province of BC for $6.3 million, which has been transferred to a provision. We received funding for major projects industrial. A portion of that was committed and spent this year. The remainder has been transferred to provision to fund project costs in the future. We've seen additional utility revenue year over year, or higher than budget, by $1.1 million. And as alluded to earlier, increased interest income by approximately $4.9 million. And lastly, on the revenue side, our transit revenues were higher than the established budget in 2023. That was due to the transfer of BC Transit Reserve. So historically, BC Transit had held any surpluses in a reserve that they maintained. In 2023, they changed their policy and they transferred those funds to the district, and the district placed those dollars in the transit provision. On the expense side, some of the highlights that we would like to inform council of are, as mentioned earlier, Queensway Lift Station and major emergency repairs, approximately $400,000. And that is, as it says, it's an emergency. Those were not budgeted expenditures. In 2023, our RCMP costs were approximately $800,000 less than our budgeted amount for the RCMP contract, and that value was transferred to the protective services provision. That $800,000 in reduced RCMP contract cost was due to the RCMP's ongoing challenges with maintaining full staffing allotments. And this is not unique to Squamish. It has been an issue for the RCMP throughout BC, and I'm quite sure other places in Canada. Our transportation costs were slightly higher than budget this year, and that is primarily due to increases in fleet expenses associated with fuel and parts. So we estimate how much we're going to spend on fleet over the year, and our budget estimation was somewhat low. Economic development costs were higher on the expense side and also on the revenue side due to municipal regional district tax or hotel tax. That's approximately $500,000. And lastly, Parks and Recreation, Parks, Rec, and Culture, their expenses were slightly higher than budget, and that's primarily due to the impact of the QP settlement year over year. So we have budgeted our best estimate for what the total cost of QP might be. They came in higher than we anticipated. Some areas are more directly dependent upon staff as a percentage of their total costs. Parks, Recreation, Culture being one of those areas. And in fairness, the vast majority of their staff are QP members. So that being said, we're going to talk a bit more about our projects. We're going to provide you a slide which outlines the nature of our year-end project categorization. And the reason that we highlight this is that at year-end, we present the projects, and projects are summarized in a slightly different categorization than you see throughout the year. Throughout the year, you're seeing a categorization that's associated with the type of project, or should I say the drivers of the projects. And here you're seeing a categorization related more to the funding metrics and also to the time frame that the project would be expected to proceed over. So as you can see here, there's a breakdown similar to what you had in your report, outlining the different categories. Within our special operating projects, we had 66 projects, and this is the overall results at year end. All of them got started, which is good news. Some were canceled or delayed. A number of them are in progress. That's that 37 in progress you see is realistically, those projects are all going to carry forward to the future years. And 24 of our projects were completed in the year. Some specific highlights related to special projects would be one of the special projects completed was the IDEA committee and associated training. A new multi-phase project was brought on stream this year for Major Projects Industrial, and that's referring to the ongoing support of WLNG and Fortis Eagle Mountain Pipeline. We had funding, external funding dependent projects. Probably the single largest one we have is for Squamish Circular Economy Trailblazer Program. And we'll just highlight that funding was received late in the year. The project itself was not, we were not able to move the project forward this year to any significant degree. And this project will carry forward into 2024. We completed a number of single year projects, and the overall savings on those single year projects that were completed was $31,000. And so that's to indicate that for the projects that we did complete, we were under budget. So always good news. Single year projects continuing into 2024, probably the largest one that we want to highlight is the Water Master Plan update, and accompanying that is a water rate study. Okay. With respect to capital projects, there were approximately 103, not approximately, there were 103 projects. One wasn't started, 73 are in progress, and you can read that those in progress will be carried forward into future years. 2 were canceled or delayed, and 27 were completed. Some of the highlights with respect to capital projects include probably our single largest project that's underway is Tantalus Fire Hall, and construction is underway. We're making quite good progress there. Another significant project that is moving forward in 2023 is Queensway Lift Station replacement, and that project was funded in the budget amendment that was passed in 2023 to address the Queensway Lift Station failure, which occurred in January. So this is a project to replace that lift station that was no longer functioning. Two other projects that we should note that were completed in the past years: Garibaldi Tantalus Signal and phase 1 of Perth Drive. And lastly, in general, annual projects receive funding each year, and we anticipate that they will attempt to complete as much of what they've set out for in each given year. There are times when specific components of the projects are underway and are not finished by year end, so they would then carry forward into the following year. This year, we're experiencing that in the area of roads and also active transportation. And with that, I will turn this back to the chair for questions and discussions of what was in the report and this presentation. We have a number of managers available today if you have specific questions related to special operating or capital projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the report and for the overview. Lots of work underway and some huge progress in terms of the way that we report out on our Q4 variance reporting. It helps streamline our conversations for sure. We'll start with Mayor Herfer, then I saw Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. I think it was under your slide under capital projects. You had only one that wasn't started, but you had another category for delayed projects. To me, if we haven't started, it's delayed or maybe canceled. So could you speak to how you're categorizing, how those things are categorized?
Yes, I can. I think the differentiation would be this. At this stage of the year, because we're at the end of the year, if a project is showing as deferred / canceled, it's probably canceled as opposed to deferred. And not started, how I would differentiate that is we do intend to go forward with that project. It is not a project that's been withdrawn. It's a project that we simply hadn't gotten to yet. Hope that.
Any further questions? No. Councillor Hamilton, go ahead.
Thanks very much. I do appreciate seeing the two, the Q4 variance and then the carry forward together. It was nice to read those together in conjunction to see what goes to what. A question I have, my question is about the water meter installations. My recollection was that council had passed a motion that water meter installations in the industrial, in the ICI sectors wouldn't be progressing in 2024. And I see a carry forward request of 500K into 2024. So just wondering, could you speak to the water meter installation project and how that coincides with the previous council conversation on it?
I could speak to this, and David Ralston may wish to add some additional comments. My recollection is the presentation to council, it was a 2-year project for water meter installation, so $1.75 million in 23 and the equivalent amount in 24. What was withdrawn was the $1.75 million in 2024. That will not proceed. Basically, what's being asked for is to continue the work that was underway in 2023 because it wasn't all completed within the 2023 calendar year, and that will require an additional $500,000.
I see a thumbs up from Mr. Rolston. So I think, Mr. Russell, you did an excellent job putting on your engineering hat. I have Councillor French next. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I wanted to ask about item 74 in the capital projects list called Brennan Park Recreation Center trailer acquisition. The description says the trailer has been purchased and will be installed at Municipal Hall. So I'm struggling to envision where at Municipal Hall a trailer could be installed. It's pretty tight here. But then Brennan Park has all kinds of space. So can staff talk a little bit more about this?
Hello, Mr. Bragg. I'll pass it over to you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for your time. Through the chair, yes, we had allocated initially funding to purchase a mobile office, and we're going to house it at Brennan Park. And that was to house some staff from Municipal Hall, also to use as a side office for Brennan Park. We've swapped and changed and merged some things around at the moment, and we still haven't resolved on an end result. But at this stage, we're looking at housing additional staff because of staff demands within Municipal Hall at the moment, at the Municipal Hall here. And we're looking at some areas in the parking at the moment. So we haven't quite landed on where it's going to go and how it's going to go. And we're working through that right now.
Any further questions?
Yes. There's a few lines dedicated to tennis and pickleball courts and Brennan Park. Nothing though about courts at Eaglewind. And I was at Eaglewind a few days ago, noted that the pickleball infrastructure is still there and the doors were locked. So when I was envisioning the pickleball project at Brennan Park, I was maybe naively thinking all of the Eaglewind's infrastructure would be pulled up and moved over to Brennan Park. That clearly didn't happen. So I'm just curious if someone can update us on what is now going to happen with the Eaglewind's courts. Will they just...
Mr. Bragg ran away, but we have Mr. Story who showed up online. I'll pass it over to you, Mr. Story. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. And through the chair, the answer to the question is the intention was to use as much as possible. Everything that was salvageable at Eaglewind was used at Brennan Park. The intent was to use any remaining funds to convert Eaglewind back to tennis. However, by the time the contract will be completed this year at Brennan Park, there will not be sufficient funding to return Eaglewind to tennis. And so at budget discussions this coming year, we will be bringing forward a budget for council's consideration to do that.
Okay, so then what does that mean for the Eaglewind's courts from now through to, say, after the Labor Day weekend?
They will remain closed as is unless we have other direction.
Okay, thank you.
It's unfortunate to see that asset sit idle through probably the most used time of year. So that's something that council may want to consider. Councillor Hamilton, I saw you. Nope. I did just have one question, which was the Ministry of Housing Capacity Funding Grant was identified in the 2023 component, but I thought that didn't come in until 2024. Just a timing issue.
We received a grant from the Ministry of Housing for approximately $240,000. We received it in late December, so it did in fact arrive in 2023. We were anticipating that it would probably arrive in 24. We got it early, so to speak.
We'll take the money earlier. That's nice. My other question was just a general observation that I feel like a lot of the carry forward projects land either within engineering and or public works. And I'm just curious if that's just the nature of the work that happens within those departments, or if that signifies something in particular around staffing and capacity within those departments.
Thank you for the question through the chair. I would say that primarily it's just based on ratio, like the number of capital projects and special projects do tend to land in those two areas, and that would be why.
Thanks. All right, Mayor Harford, go ahead.
Thank you. In the capital project, carry forward category, there's the Malcolm Ring Road, and I just wondered if this would be an opportunity to have a quick update, at least to when the timeline is for that, if it's going to come back to council. There's a piece missing here where Physical works complete, and I suppose that's where the budget was used. Risk safety analysis underway to be completed in Q1, and it'll require a slight carry forward. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but if there's opportunity for a slight update as we consider that carry forward.
Welcome to the table, Ms. Bailey.
Thank you. Sarah Bailey, Director of Engineering, through the chair. Yes, that amount that's being carried forward was to do a broader risk assessment on Mamquam Ring Road. And we are currently in receipt of that, and staff are doing a review, and we'll be bringing forward something as soon as we can.
And I'm sorry, Councillor Anderson, I had you on my list, but then I deviated from my list. So we'll go to you.
That's quite all right, Chair. I have a question for our Economic Development Director. I see that, or we've learned that the Circular Economy Trailblazer program will proceed over the next 2 years, but there's 3 projects for which the grant applied for was not received, each for $60,000. 2 are named, the Agri-Foods Implementation and the Labor Force Development Plan, but there is a third one. And I wonder if you could remind me what that was. And it just says here, item number 35, economic special projects was grant dependent, which was not received. Just wonder, we probably discussed it last fall, but what that item was.
Through the chair, we put a placeholder grant application in so that we would have additional funding to be able to match any emergent grants that came up during the year. We didn't receive any emergent grants. May have applied for some, but they didn't come through. So that additional funding that we had put in wasn't used. So it basically was to allow us to match additional opportunities if they arose during the year.
Thank you for that explanation. I do have another question, and this concerns the Employment Land Model 2.0, question for either economic development or planning. I know you're partnering on that project. Now, if this version 2.0 that we have now in place, a project complete, it says here, if it is being used, might it be possible to present a council with an information report? It had been scheduled earlier for a council presentation, but of course it's a project under evolution. But would it be possible to have, I'm curious whether it may be possible to update us in the way of an information report on that 2.0 project completed.
Jen Stone, Economic Development, through the chair. The update on that is there is a separate piece of work now called the split model, which has received an application, which has put in an application for funding. It's now considered the next stage of that piece of work, but it's being treated as a new project. So that's why the line item that you're seeing is considered complete, but there is a new special project called the split model, and that's the next iteration of that. But yes, that could come to council for your information.
Thank you very much. In as much as you are using that information in projects that are coming before us for review. Thank you.
Thank you. Did I see your hand, Councillor Hamilton? Go ahead.
Thanks. And through the chair, if the chair will allow me, this is a little bit of a deviation from the report, but it's tied slightly. It's on the Mamquam Ring Road. I was wondering if staff had an update on when that road might be available for use, not for the public, but for commercial large vehicle traffic.
Hi, through the chair. Thank you for the question. It'll be the same answer. We have an engineer's report now. Staff are currently reviewing, and we'll bring an update as soon as we can. Thanks.
Thank you for that slight deviation. I have a few more questions, and I'll come back to you, Councillor Pettingill. The other ones that jumped out at me, there are a few line items under single year projects for the Adventure Center, which are listed as completed, but actually the funds were reallocated to other repairs. And so I'm just curious if those identified projects then just don't happen. So the Adventure Center carpet replacement, the Adventure Center new washroom counters, are those, do they just kind of like fall off the priority list, or how do we handle projects when that funding has been reallocated to other revitalization projects within that same building? I think it might be over to you, Mr. Stoner.
It is over to me. I believe we have Kyle White, our facilities manager, online. I'm hoping, because I can't speak to that. So I will see if I can get him.
All right, we'll leave that there for a sec. Councillor Pettingill, over to you.
Yeah, I hesitate to ask this, but is there a reason why we aren't able to leave the former pickleball court at Eagle Wind open as is, as opposed to closed as is?
We'll pass over Mr. Story to answer that question. Then I see that Kyle's also here, but we'll go on the pickleball question to Mr. Story first.
Thank you, through the chair. With some a little bit amount of work, it could be open to other uses. It would require a little bit of funding to do that, just to clean up the any tripping hazards left over from the bases from the poles. But we could certainly look at using it as some other types of use.
Thank you. And welcome, Mr. White. My question, I'll just repeat it, was whether, so there's a few projects listed as completed for the Adventure Center, but actually the funds are reallocated to other emergency repairs or revitalization. That's the carpet replacement, the new washroom counters. Do those projects then just fall off the priority list? Are they incorporated into a future financial plan? How do we address those particular projects if the funding's been reallocated?
Thank you. Kyle White, Facilities Manager. Through the chair, the washroom counter project was reallocated to the revitalization project and was completed as part of that project. So that work has been completed. The carpet replacement project the funds were taken from that to be shared with the emergency upgrades, which was a sprinkler repipe that was completed. The carpet replacement project actually was a little bit under budgeted for, and we're looking to adding that in the future. So once we come up with a whole scope for that project, we can add it into the financial plan.
Thank you very much for that update. Council, any further questions on our quarterly variance report? And a reminder that we'll have the bylaw around the carry forward amendment this evening. Not seeing any further questions. There is a staff recommendation in our report. I'll see Mayor Herford move that, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Any comments at this time? Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, I'll just say, and I appreciate the clarification around the court. I'm hesitant to, and so I'm not going to give any council direction at this point. I think this whole exercise ended up costing us a lot more than we anticipated. But I'll just sort of say in general, would love to see that infrastructure is able to be used in some manner, even if it's not the ideal manner we had wanted, and maybe in a transition phase. So I'm not sure I want to dictate what that is and dig into the details of it, but if there's any way we can find a way to, and understanding there's a lot of sensitivity around that specific spot now, but if there's a way for it to be active over the summer in some manner, I think that would be fantastic.
All conversations lead back to pickleball. Go ahead, Mayor Herford.
Yeah, thank you. Just thank you for the report, and to all of staff for making as much progress as we have over the year. It's quite something to see it laid out in this way, and there's still lots of work to do. So thank you so much for that, and happy to support.
Any other comments? I'll make a few. Thanks so much to staff for this report and for the update. It wasn't that many years ago that we didn't actually have quarterly variance reporting at all. And this really provides council and the community some really in-depth analysis and understanding of what work is going on, progress on the budget, and definitely the Q4 variance one in particular is helpful to understand just how much we're expecting and anticipating of staff to deliver, and the amazing ability for you folks to be able to do that. While there are definitely still some projects that are being carried forward, and I think there's good reason for lots of those, some of the numbers in this report with respect to the district's ability to actually come in underspent on a lot of projects, despite the inflationary pressures that we've seen over the past year, is really substantive. And I think that's something to celebrate. And there's always more work to do, but it's important to take time and actually just realize how much work has been done over the past year. So thanks to everybody for getting the projects underway, complete, and moving them through the process. And with that, I will call the question. Anyone opposed to the recommendation? Not seeing any, motion passes unanimously. Thanks very much for being here and for ending on time. Councillor Hamilton. I have a motion to terminate from Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Mayor Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.